My name is Evelyn Mercer, and I never thought a simple doctor's appointment would save my life. I am 69 years old, a retired journalist, and a widow of 12 years. For most of my life, I believed that hard work, decency, and love could hold any family together. That illusion shattered the day my doctor handed me a note that said, "Don't go home. Run." It was a humid Tuesday morning in Charlotte, the kind of day when the air felt thick and restless. I had my routine checkup at Dr. Leo Hartman's clinic, a man I'd known for over 2 decades, ever since he treated my late husband, Richard. He had always been steady, precise, the kind of man who could deliver bad news with kindness. But that morning, something about him was different. His eyes flicked toward the hallway every few seconds, as if he expected someone to burst in. His hand trembled slightly when he checked my pulse. "Your blood pressure's perfect," he said, but his voice wasn't steady. "Heart strong, lungs clear. You've got many good years ahead of you, Evelyn." He smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that brings comfort. It was the kind that hides fear. When I stood up to grab my purse, Dr. Hartman suddenly leaned in closer. "Take care of yourself," he murmured. His hand brushed mine for a brief second, leaving behind a folded piece of paper that slipped into the side pocket of my bag so quietly that I almost didn't notice. Before I could ask what was going on, he straightened up and said louder, "Always good to see you, Mrs. Mercer. And remember, family isn't always what it seems." I froze. The words sounded like a riddle. Outside, the sun blazed over the parking lot, yet my body felt cold. In the cab home, curiosity gnawed at me until I finally reached into my purse. The note was small, the handwriting hurried and uneven. It said only 5 words: "Don't go home. Run." My chest tightened. Why would my doctor write this? Was someone in danger? Was he warning me about my health? Or was it something else? As I stared at those words, the faces of my family came to mind. My stepson Daniel, his elegant but sharp-tongued wife Clara, and their daughter Madison, my only grandchild. They had lived with me ever since Richard's passing. Lately, they had been distant, whispering when I entered the room, closing laptop screens, exchanging glances I couldn't decode. The cab turned onto my street. My stomach sank. Through the window, I saw Daniel's car parked outside, and the faint shadow of 3 figures moving inside the living room. When I walked in, their conversation stopped. Clara hid some papers behind her back. Madison's eyes darted to her father's face. "How was the checkup, Mom?" Daniel asked, forcing a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Fine," I said, my voice too calm. "Dr. Hartman says I'm in perfect health." They exchanged a look, quick, uneasy, disappointed. That night, as I lay awake listening to their muffled voices down the hall, I realized something terrifying. Whatever Dr. Hartman had meant by run, it wasn't a mistake. He had saved my life, and I had no idea yet from what. I barely slept that night. Every sound in the house made me flinch: the creak of the hallway floor, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint echo of laughter that didn't sound like love anymore. The note from Dr. Hartman burned in my mind. "Don't go home. Run." But it was too late. I was already inside. At around 2 a.m, I heard the soft clink of glasses and whispers coming from the kitchen. My heart pounded as I slipped out of bed, careful not to make a sound. The voices were low, urgent, familiar. Daniel's, Clara's, and Madison's. I crept to the top of the stairs and leaned forward just enough to hear. "The doctor didn't sign anything," Clara hissed. "He said Evelyn's perfectly healthy. We can't move forward without that report." Daniel sighed. "Then we find another doctor, someone willing to take cash and write what we need. It's not that hard." "What we need," Clara repeated with a sharp edge, "is control. As long as she's in that house, we have nothing. Once she's declared mentally unfit, everything changes. The will, the accounts, the house. It'll all be ours to manage." I gripped the banister so tightly my fingers went numb. "She trusts you," Clara continued. You just have to play the worried son a little longer. Tell her she's been forgetful lately. Tell her she left the gas on. The woman's old. No one will question it. Then Madison spoke my sweet granddaughter, the child I had raised on bedtime stories and piano lessons. Her tone was flat. Grandma doesn't even know how to use her phone half the time. We could switch her pills, mix them up a little. If she starts acting confused, it'll look real. A pause. Then Daniel's voice, quieter now. Don't talk like that, Madison. But Clara's cold laugh cut through the room. She's right. A few weeks of confusion, and we'll have enough evidence for a judge to step in. No more waiting for her to die naturally. Their words hit me like stones. They weren't just plotting to take my house, they were planning to dismantle my mind, piece by piece, until I stopped being me. Daniel clinked his glass against Clara's. We'll start small, hide her things, move her keys, her jewelry, tell her she misplaced them. Soon she'll question everything she does. I pressed a hand over my mouth to stop a gasp. And the doctor? Madison asked. What if he talks? He won't, Clara said confidently. He has no proof. Besides, if Evelyn loses it fast enough, no one will believe a word she says. Their laughter echoed through the dark house, blending with the ticking of the old clock in the hallway, the same clock Richard bought for our first anniversary. In that moment, the people I had called family became strangers. My stepson, the boy I once carried on my shoulders, the woman I welcomed like a daughter, the granddaughter I had sung to sleep. They were all planning my destruction, and they didn't know that I was standing just above them, listening, memorizing every word. When the laughter finally stopped, I went back to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and whispered to the silence. You wanted a confused old woman, Clara. You're about to get something far more dangerous. The first light of dawn slipped through my curtains when I finally stood up from the bed. I had made my decision. I wasn't going to sit here and wait for my own family to destroy me. I was going to disappear before they even realized what was happening. My hands shook as I opened the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed, the one Richard and I had used to store travel keepsakes. I pulled out my passport, the spare bank card from our joint account, a few pieces of jewelry, and the flash drive Richard had given me before he died. He had called it our safety key, though I never knew what it contained. I packed everything into a small suitcase, only what I could carry without drawing attention. Before leaving, I paused by the mirror. The reflection staring back at me looked older than I remembered, tired, frightened, but fierce. You've faced corrupt politicians and liars before, I whispered to myself. You can face them too. I grabbed my phone and quietly opened the voice recorder app. If they wanted to twist the truth, I would make sure the truth had a voice. I slipped into the hallway, every step calculated, every breath measured. As I passed Daniel and Clara's bedroom, faint voices came through the door. I stopped. Are you sure the pills will work? Clara's voice asked. Daniel grunted. If she starts acting strange, it'll prove she's declining. I'll call that new psychiatrist. He's willing to sign the papers if he sees symptoms. Good, Clara said. And once the documents are ready, we'll sell the house. Madison already picked a car she wants. Daniel laughed. She'll have to wait until we transfer the funds. My stomach twisted, but I held the phone close, recording every word. When the conversation died down, I walked silently to the door, slipped my shoes on, and stepped outside into the pale morning fog. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I called a cab from the corner of the street, giving the driver my maiden name, Evelyn Pierce, and asked him to take me downtown. The moment we pulled away, a weight lifted from my chest, though fear still clung to me like smoke. At the bank, I withdrew $5,000 in cash. The teller, a polite young man, hesitated. That's a lot to carry, ma'am. Are you sure you don't want a cashier's check? I looked him straight in the eye. I'm sure. I'm settling some personal matters. From there, I went to a boutique hotel in uptown Charlotte. Its glass facade gleamed in the morning sun, a place so modern and quiet that Daniel and Clara would never think to look for me there. Under what name, ma'am? the receptionist asked with a professional smile. Evelyn Pierce, I said. I'd like to stay for at least a month. In the elevator, I exhaled for the first time all morning. When the doors opened to my suite, I set the suitcase down and walked straight to the window. Below, the city pulsed with life, unaware of the war I was preparing to fight. I plugged in the flash drive Richard had left me and watched as a single encrypted folder appeared on the screen. Its title made my breath hitch: Trust Evidence. Tears filled my eyes. My husband had left me more than memories, he had left me a shield. Outside, the sunrise burned gold across the skyline. I whispered to the city, to the ghosts of everyone who had ever underestimated me. They think I'm running, but I'm just getting started. By the next morning, my fear had settled into focus. Years of journalism had taught me one thing: when you want the truth, follow the paper trail and never blink first. I called the number printed on the small business card that Dr. Hartman had once given me. When he answered, his voice trembled. Evelyn, thank God. Are you safe? Yes, I said, staring out the hotel window. But you need to tell me everything. He hesitated before speaking. They came to see me, Evelyn, 2 weeks ago. Your son and his wife. They asked me to write a report saying you had early dementia. When I refused, Clara offered me money. His voice broke. That's why I slipped you the note. I was afraid if I told you directly they'd find out and come after me too. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The betrayal felt heavier than any headline I'd ever written. You did the right thing, I finally said. Now it's my turn. That afternoon, I walked into the office of Julia Rhodes, a well-known attorney specializing in elder protection and estate fraud. She was sharp-eyed, with a calm voice that could slice through chaos. Mrs. Mercer, she said, scanning the documents I'd brought, you're not the first to face this kind of abuse, but you might be the first who came prepared. I handed her my recordings, the withdrawal slips, and the note from Dr. Hartman. She listened, nodding slowly. We'll need evidence of their financial activity, bank transfers, property filings, anything they forged in your name. I know how to find it, I said quietly. I've tracked liars my entire career. Julia smiled. Then we'll make a great team. Within 24 hours, she introduced me to a private investigator named Miles Connor, a wiry man in his 50s with a dry sense of humor and eyes that missed nothing. He started digging into my family's financials using legal channels, and within 3 days, the results made my stomach turn. Clara had applied for 2 credit cards under my name, charging almost $28,000 at luxury boutiques and restaurants. Daniel had forged my signature on a temporary power of attorney document, claiming it was for tax simplification. And Madison, my sweet granddaughter, had been telling neighbors I was losing my mind, laying the groundwork for a court petition. When Julia presented the findings, she tapped her pen thoughtfully. This isn't just theft, it's coordinated psychological manipulation. They're building a case to destroy your credibility. But the worst came later that night. Miles called with a grim tone. You should sit down for this one, Evelyn. I did. Your daughter-in-law's been having an affair with your financial advisor, Matthew Cole. He's been moving small amounts from your investment account into a private offshore fund. They're planning to cash out as soon as the guardianship papers go through. I felt my chest tighten, but instead of breaking, something inside me hardened. I had exposed liars, criminals, and men twice as powerful in my career. Now, I would expose my own family. I want every detail, I said. Every transaction, every meeting, every name. Miles chuckled softly. That's the spirit, Mrs. Mercer. After the call, I poured myself a cup of tea and opened my notebook, the same one I had used during my reporting days. I began listing names, dates, connections. My hand was steady. My heartbeat was not fear, it was adrenaline. They had underestimated the woman they called fragile. By the time the clock struck midnight, I had only one thought left in my mind. If they want to play with lies, I'll drown them in the truth. By the 5th day, I was done hiding. Fear had turned into precision, and my plan was ready. Julia Miles and I met in her office, a quiet room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and the faint smell of old paper. I sat across from them, my notebook open, the same steady determination that had once carried me through war zones and courtroom scandals burning in my chest. "I want to go back home," I said. Miles raised an eyebrow. "That's dangerous." "Exactly," I replied. "They think I'm weak. That's how we'll catch them." Julia leaned forward. "You'll need protection. I'll get a court observer ready. If they try anything illegal, we'll move fast." That night, I drove back to my house in the north of Charlotte, a quiet neighborhood lined with blooming dogwoods. As I stepped through the front door, the air felt colder, staler. My family was sitting in the living room like a panel of judges. "Mom," Daniel said, rising to hug me, his voice dripping with artificial concern. "We were so worried. Where have you been?" "I needed time to think," I replied calmly, setting my bag down. "I realized maybe I've been too stubborn. Maybe you're right. Maybe I do need help managing things." Clara's eyes brightened, a predator sensing blood. "That's wonderful, Evelyn. We can arrange everything for you. It's for your own comfort." "Oh, I know," I said softly, pretending gratitude. I even recorded a message about it, just so I don't forget. I placed my phone face down on the coffee table, its screen glowing faintly. It was recording. For the next few days, I played the role of the docile grandmother. I forgot appointments, misplaced objects, and asked the same questions twice. They bought it completely. Daniel began calling a lawyer friend about guardianship proceedings, and Clara started collecting my documents again. Meanwhile, Julia and Miles had hidden small cameras throughout the house. One inside the kitchen clock, one above the bookshelf, another behind the framed family portrait. Every whisper, every forged signature, every deceitful word would be caught. On the fourth night, I overheard Clara talking in the kitchen. "Once she signs those papers tomorrow, the house is ours. I've already talked to a realtor." Daniel's voice followed. "And the psychiatrist's ready. He'll confirm her dementia after one meeting. We'll have full control of everything by the end of the week." My stomach twisted, but I kept my face neutral when I entered the room. "Did I hear you talking about the house?" I asked gently. Daniel stiffened. "We were just saying how we'll help you with the bills, Mom." I smiled. "That's kind of you." Later that night, Miles sent me a text. Everything recorded, ready for the sting. The next afternoon, I invited them all to sit with me in the living room. I wore Richard's old wristwatch and one of my pearl necklaces. "I've made my decision," I told them. "I think I should give you power of attorney." Clara gasped, nearly trembling with excitement. "That's the right choice, Evelyn. It's what's best for everyone." "Wonderful," Daniel said, reaching for a folder. "We can sign it right now." At that exact moment, there was a loud knock on the door. When Daniel opened it, 2 uniformed officers and Julia walked in, followed by Miles carrying a laptop. Julia's voice was clear, professional, and cold. "Mr. and Mrs. Mercer, this is a warrant to seize and review all financial documents and digital records related to Miss Evelyn Mercer's estate. You are both under investigation for attempted fraud and elder abuse." Clara's face went white. Daniel's hands dropped the folder. Miles pressed a button on his laptop, and their own voices filled the room, every word of their plan, every threat, every lie. "You wanted to take everything from me," I said quietly, "but you forgot who I was." Outside, the first siren wailed in the distance, echoing down the street like a closing curtain. By the time the police cars pulled away, flashing red and blue against the magnolia trees, the house felt heavier than it ever had before. The officers had taken Daniel and Clara for questioning, while Madison sat on the couch, pale and silent, her mascara streaked from tears. I didn't say a word to her. There was nothing left to say. That night, I returned to the hotel with Julia and Miles. I should have felt relieved, but something inside me refused to settle. This wasn't over. Daniel and Clara were arrogant, not stupid. They would have planned for backup. I needed to find every trace of their lies before they found a way to escape consequences. The next morning, Julia called. "Evelyn, you should sit down," she said carefully. "The financial advisor, Matthew Cole, disappeared last night. The FBI is now involved." I gripped the phone tighter. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" "He cleared his office, transferred what he could, and vanished. But there's good news. We've frozen the remaining accounts before anything else could move. Still, we need to figure out what he was trying to hide." My pulse raced. I walked to the window, looking down at the morning traffic below. The thought hit me suddenly, the flash drive. Trust evidence. I hadn't explored it fully yet. Maybe Richard had known something long before any of this started. When I opened the folder, a single document appeared. Richard Mercer, Final Trust. PDF password protected. Below it was a note in his handwriting. "Evelyn, if you're reading this, press the lowest C key on the piano." My breath caught. The Steinway piano still stood in the living room of our old home, the one Daniel had been so eager to sell. "I need to go back to the house," I told Julia. "Absolutely not," she protested. "It's still under investigation." "Then get me an escort," I said firmly. "There's something there my husband left for me." An hour later, I stood once again inside the home that had become a battlefield. The piano sat by the bay window, silent and perfect, as if it had been waiting for me. The officer beside me watched as I lifted the lid and pressed the lowest C key. A faint click echoed inside the wooden frame. My fingers trembled as I reached under the keyboard and pulled out a small sealed envelope wrapped in wax paper. Inside was a folded document, yellowed with age but notarized. It was a living trust, dated 7 years before Richard's death. Every asset, our properties, our investments, even the company shares Daniel thought were his, had been placed under my sole control. My knees nearly buckled. He had known. Beneath the legal pages was a letter in Richard's familiar script. "If you are reading this, my love, it means the people I feared have shown their faces. I trusted too easily once, but I trust you to finish what I started. Everything is yours, not out of possession, but protection. Let truth be your inheritance." Tears blurred the ink as I pressed the letter to my chest. All the years I had felt weak, dependent, irrelevant, Richard had been protecting me even from beyond the grave. When Julia saw the document, her jaw dropped. "Evelyn, this changes everything. This isn't just protection, it's a fortress. Legally, your family never had a single claim." I let out a slow breath, the kind that felt like waking up after a long nightmare. "They tried to steal what was never theirs," I whispered. "And now they'll find out what happens when truth fights back." That night, as the rain began to fall outside the hotel window, I placed the trust papers beside my tea and looked up at the sky. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. I was finally ready for it. 3 weeks later, the case of State of North Carolina versus Daniel and Clara Mercer became front-page news. Cameras crowded the courthouse steps, and for the first time in years, my name appeared in bold print, but not as a byline. I had been the one telling other people's stories all my life. Now the story was mine. When I walked into the courtroom, I felt 1,000 eyes on me. I wore a navy suit Richard had always loved, my silver hair pinned neatly, my posture straight. Julia walked beside me, calm and steady, a quiet storm in heels. "Remember," she whispered, "you don't need to prove strength. Just tell the truth. The truth will do the rest." Daniel sat at the defense table, thinner than I remembered, his arrogance replaced by exhaustion. Clara looked brittle, her face pale under the fluorescent lights. Madison was nowhere in sight. I had heard she was refusing to testify for them. The prosecutor began with the recordings, my recordings. Daniel's voice filled the room. "We'll switch her meds, hide her things, make her question herself." The jury shifted uncomfortably. Then came Clara's voice, laughing. "Once she's declared incompetent, everything's ours." I watched Daniel's hands tremble. Clara's jaw clenched. Every lie they had crafted unraveled, thread by thread, in front of a silent courtroom. Then came the video footage the hidden cameras Miles had installed. There they were on screen, signing fake documents, forging my signature, arguing over how much they could sell my house for. The jury gasped audibly. Even the judge leaned forward. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with slow, deliberate steps. The oath felt heavier than it ever had when I used to sit in courtrooms as a journalist. This time, I wasn't writing about truth. I was speaking it. "Mrs. Mercer," the prosecutor said gently, "can you tell us what you felt when you realized your family was conspiring against you?" I looked at Daniel. His eyes darted away. "I felt like I'd spent my life loving ghosts," I said. "People I thought were mine. I raised Daniel since he was 2 years old. I taught him compassion, honesty. I believed that would protect us both. I was wrong." I paused, the courtroom still. "They didn't just try to take my home. They tried to erase me, my mind, my dignity, everything I had left of myself. But I didn't fight them out of hatred. I fought because silence would have meant surrendering to their cruelty, and I've never been one to surrender." Julia placed her hand on mine when I stepped down. "You did beautifully," she whispered. When the verdict finally came, the air felt thick enough to cut. The foreman stood, his voice clear. "We, the jury, find the defendants guilty on all counts." Clara gasped, covering her face. Daniel just stared blankly ahead, as if the floor beneath him had vanished. The judge sentenced Daniel to 12 years in prison and Clara to 10, plus restitution for every stolen dollar. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I simply stood there, feeling the weight of justice settling over years of pain. Outside, reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, microphones flashing. One young woman asked, "Mrs. Mercer, do you believe justice was served?" I looked into the camera, my voice steady. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about remembering who you are after everyone else tries to tell you you're nothing. Today, I remembered. The flashbulbs burst like lightning around me, but for the first time in years, I didn't flinch. I simply walked forward into the light. 6 months passed after the verdict, and Charlotte began to bloom again. The magnolias opened along the streets. The air carried that soft spring warmth that always reminded me of Richard's laughter. I had moved into a small cottage near Lake Norman, a place with white shutters, a garden full of lavender, and a quiet stillness that made the soul feel safe. Some mornings, I still woke up expecting to hear the chaos of the old house, the clatter of dishes, Clara's sharp voice echoing down the hall, Daniel's footsteps pacing near my door. But then sunlight would pour through the curtains, and I'd remember that silence can be the most beautiful sound in the world. Madison came to live with me after the trial. She had testified for the prosecution, giving evidence her parents never knew she recorded. Her courage had helped seal their fate. Now, at 17, she was softer, quieter, but stronger too. She helped me plant flowers in the garden, helped repaint the living room, and sometimes just sat by the lake with me, saying nothing. We didn't need words. We were 2 survivors learning how to breathe again. One afternoon, as we watched the water ripple in the breeze, Madison turned to me. "Grandma," she said, "do you ever wish you hadn't found out what they were doing?" I thought about that for a long moment. Sometimes, I admitted, because ignorance can feel like peace. But peace built on lies doesn't last. Truth always comes one way or another. The only question is whether you're brave enough to face it. She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "You were brave." I smiled faintly. "I wasn't brave, sweetheart. I was just tired of being afraid." Inside the cottage, my desk had become my new newsroom. Instead of deadlines, I wrote memories. My story, "Run, Grandma, Run," spread across social media, and soon older women from all over the country began writing to me. Some were widows like me. Some were fighting families who wanted their homes, their money, or their silence. They called me the grandmother who didn't give up. Julia visited often. One evening she arrived with good news. The state legislature had just passed a bill strengthening laws against financial and psychological abuse of elders. They called it the Mercer Law. When she told me, I laughed softly, almost in disbelief. They named it after me? They named it after your courage, Julia said, and your story. Later that night, I sat at my desk by the window, the same window that overlooked the lake. The reflection of the moon danced on the surface of the water, and I thought about everything I had lost and everything I had found. I wrote the final lines of my memoir that night. Family is not blood. It is loyalty, respect, and love that asks for nothing in return. Age is not weakness. It is the crown of those who have survived storms and still choose to be kind. When betrayal breaks you, don't look for revenge, look for truth. It will save you in ways anger never can. The pen stopped moving. I looked up at the calm lake and whispered, "Thank you, Richard. You protected me even from beyond." In that moment, I realized I had finally come full circle, not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as a woman reborn through truth. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt free.